Meeting will come to order. This is a meeting of the Land Use Committee of the Bloomington City Council, meeting on the 7th of August, 2019. We have one item on the agenda, Ordinance 1912, regarding the proposal for 1800 North Walnut Street, CDG Acquisitions LLC petitioner. I have asked Mr. Grulich, who is here to present on behalf of the Planning Department, to limit the total presentation to 20 minutes, but seeing as I'm guessing that there's no members of the public here, if we go half an hour, I think it's okay. We have until 7:15. So with that, Mr. Grulich, if you're ready to begin your presentation on this, we'd like to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a request from CDG Acquisitions to rezone a piece of property that is on the north side of town. This 3.85 acre property is at 1800 North Walnut Street and is currently occupied by the Motel 6 development. The property is currently zoned commercial arterial, and the petitioner is proposing to rezone the petition site to a planned unit development to allow for a student-oriented multifamily housing project. So with this approval, there would be a rezoning to the planned unit development designation, as well as approval of a district ordinance that would govern the regulations for the zoning district. This would include density, height, setbacks, and architecture. So this was reviewed at the Plan Commission in the June 10th hearing, and the Plan Commission voted unanimously to forward this to the council with a favorable recommendation. So they are here tonight to kind of carry forward with the last step of that process. So this is an aerial photograph showing the area in question. The Motel 6 is in the center of the property, or in the center of your screen here. To the west of this is the Miller Showers Park. To the north, east, and south of this are a mix of commercial uses along Walnut Street, as well as some student-oriented housing. To the north, east, and south of this, you'll also find predominantly that this area has been developed with high-density student-oriented housing. So as part of the comprehensive plan process that was undertaken just recently, one of the areas of focus of the comprehensive plan was to deal with student-oriented housing. There were several areas of the comprehensive plan that dealt with the appropriate locations for where student-oriented housing should occur, and there were several policy guidelines that specifically denoted that until such time as more appropriate locations are found, student-oriented housing should be oriented away from the downtown. So the particular area that we are looking at here that has Motel 6 as well as the surrounding properties, as you can see in the aerial photograph, have all been developed with student-oriented housing. So the area that we're looking at here that we've kind of highlighted within the comprehensive plan to be a more appropriate location is this entire corridor that's bounded by the bypass to the north, College and Walnut to the west, 17th Street to the south, and then Dunn Street to the east. So this area, as I mentioned, has already been developed with high-density student-oriented housing. It's immediately adjacent to the football stadium, as well as the IU bus route and main pickup drop-off location. So with about 3 years ago, the Planning Commission and the City Council approved another redevelopment project within this section of the city. This was for the Dunn Hill Apartments. The Evolve project, which is on the southeast corner of this quadrant. It's at the northwest corner of 17th and Dunn. And that project was a redevelopment of the Dunn Hill Apartments to allow for a student-oriented housing development. That was a planned unit development as well. That was approved very similar to this project at about 75 units an acre, and was about 4 stories, 5 stories, 6 stories in height, with a maximum height of 70 feet for that project. So with this area being designated or highlighted as an area that is ideal for student-oriented housing, it's not embedded in a single-family neighborhood. It's immediately adjacent to goods and services. It's on arterial roads. This has been highlighted as an area that could be a great location outside of the downtown to serve the housing needs for the student population. So with that, the petitioners have come forward with the site plan. Just a brief overall of the petition. There would be 2 buildings on the site that would range in height from 5 to 6 stories. There's about a minimum of 6,000 square feet of retail that has been designated along the front of the building, with another 6,000 square feet set aside for amenity space. The buildings would have a mix of studio units, 1-bedroom units, 2-bedroom units, and 4-bedroom units. So there is a maximum density that has been shown with this project. So although the petitioners have given us a unit and bedroom and possible unit and bedroom breakdown, that might change from the final plan stage to what you're seeing now, but it would be limited by the maximum density that is being proposed of about 77 units per acre. There would be a central parking garage constructed with this project that would have a minimum of 410 parking spaces. There are 8 spaces that would be shown in front of the commercial space, which would provide a total of 418 parking spaces. Based on the proposed bedroom count that we currently have, they're right about 0.5 parking spaces per bedroom, and they've proposed a maximum of 0.75 spaces per bedroom. So this went to the Planning Commission for 2 hearings. In between the first and the second hearing, there were several comments made at the Planning Commission. First hearing regarding some architecture, off-site improvements to improve pedestrian accessibility to the site, suggestions regarding improving sidewalk stubs on this property as well to help promote pedestrian movement, as well as discussions regarding the contribution that the petitioners are making to the Housing Development Fund. So between the first and the second hearing, the petitioners looked at the surrounding area and noticed a substantial sidewalk gap along Walnut Street and 19th Street just to the south of this. One of the benefits of this particular site is the proximity to the IU Stadium bus shelter and drop-off just to the east of this. So in order to help improve pedestrian accessibility to that location, there are 2 kind of paths to get to that. Certainly the most direct path is to go east through the Varsity Villas project to get to that site. However, there is not a direct connection and or willingness with Varsity Villas to specifically accommodate that. So the petitioners did show a sidewalk stub to the Varsity Villas property with the hope that in the future with any redevelopment of Varsity Villas or that overall site, that there could be a more direct connection shown with that sidewalk stub. Yep, so Varsity Villas and Stadium Crossing is the large development just to the east of that. So the Motel 6 property, if you can see where my cursor is kind of moving, encompasses this area. And then so the sidewalk stub is shown kind of in the northeast corner of the Motel 6 property. So there is a parking lot just to the east of this. However, there is a fence and kind of retaining wall between the 2 properties that does provide a physical barrier to the direct access. But the petitioners on their site plan have shown a sidewalk stub right up to the property line so that, if something changes in the future, that can easily be extended and provide a more direct connection right over to Varsity Villas, which is pretty much almost the front door of the IU Stadium parking area. The owners of Varsity Villas were not interested in having pedestrians from this site move through their property. So there was some difficulty in working with them. So the petitioners have done everything in their power to stub to that property, but that will kind of fall on the adjacent owner or redevelopment of that property to get a better connection through there.
So what are the other sidewalk connections?
Yep. So the next thing that the petitioners looked at was the sidewalk connections along the existing public roads that are adjacent to this site. So there are sidewalks leading north from this site all the way up to the bypass. However, just immediately to the south of this site, adjacent to the Parkview Apartments, there is a gap in the sidewalk system both along Walnut Street and 19th Street. So the petitioners agreed to install an off-site improvement for that sidewalk along Walnut Street that would then wrap around to 19th Street. And there are various sidewalk segments along 19th Street that would then carry folks over to the Dunn Street area, again, right to the front door of the IU Stadium bus route. So they have agreed to install those off-site pedestrian improvements to improve connectivity for pedestrians in the corridor as a whole.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
No, you're good. So that was one aspect that changed between the first and the second hearing. The Planning Commission also expressed some concerns regarding the architecture and the view of the building. So the petitioners incorporated a little bit more brick along the front of the building, improved some of the materials to help give it a little bit more unique of an architectural flavor to it. So they added more brick, improved some of the look of the building to help give it a better street frontage view. So I'll go back real quick to the site plan so we can walk through that. So this is the overall site plan that is being shown. As I mentioned, there are two buildings. There is a main building that is on the front portion of the property, and then a second building that extends along the east side. The property has kind of a very unique shape. As you can see here, it's got a large square front and then a more narrow flag lot that extends along the back. There's also a water line that runs, a public water line that runs through this property that extends to the properties to the east that the petitioners had to work around as well. So the access drive that you see along the east portion of the lot has a utility line right underneath it. So there will be one drive cut, actually two drive cuts on Walnut Street. With this petition, there's currently a misalignment of the existing drive that is across Miller Showers Park. So in order to get into this site currently, you have to temporarily kind of drive the wrong way south on Walnut Street to get into this property. So the petitioners are realigning the entrance to directly align with that cut through between College and Walnut Street to get rid of that. So there will be a new street connection there, as well as an outlet on the north side of the site. So the internal drive will be a one-way road. There is a easement that is on this property that serves the property just to the south of this. So the petitioners have to work around that as well. So they've shown a connection to the property to the south to provide vehicular access to that. As I mentioned, there are 8 parking spaces that are shown along the commercial space right on the front of the building. So the petitioners have shown some parking spaces immediately adjacent to the retail in order to give that the greatest viability. But otherwise, it's a one-way drive aisle with angled parking spaces immediately in front of that retail, and then a one-way out to the north. There is a drive that extends around the building and then extends to the building on the east as well. That is for fire department access to the portions of the building. So the buildings also have 2 courtyards to provide some green space and help break up the building massing. The building on the west side has 2 courtyards. The building on the east side also has 2 courtyards, just to give some variety to the architecture and break up the facade along there. You can see the sidewalk stub on the far east or right side of the screen, and that, as I mentioned, that just stubs to the parking or the property line with the hopes that will be extended in the future. So the elevations that have been shown and the materials are a mix of brick and cementous siding with some areas of metal paneling. There's a variety of color schemes to give this a unique look. The bottom floor has a significant amount of glass, as well as the glass corner at the southeast corner, and then glass at the northwest corner of the building. So you can see this is the commercial space along this area here. There are no definitive tenants online yet, but that would be determined as they get closer to the construction. So they have submitted a massing model of this particular building. I believe the petitioners have a different model that shows some of the adjacent buildings that they will give in their presentation. As I mentioned, it's a 5-story building along the front with a 6-story building along the back. It does step up in height. The maximum height for this, I believe, is around 70 feet. There are several buildings along this corridor that are at the 50-foot height limit. The Hampton Inn just to the south of this, the Hilton Inn just to the south of this, and then the Hamptons just to the north are both 4 or 5-story buildings. So the petitioners have a massing model that I believe they're going to kind of go through that will work through some of those adjacent buildings as well. So this is a view from the street. You can see Walnut Street along the left side of the screen. It's a 5-story building along the front, and it steps back to 6 stories for the building portions on the rear of the site. So as I kind of briefly mentioned at the beginning part of my presentation, obviously with any PUD and a rezoning, we have to review this for compliance with the comprehensive plan. There are 2 very specific policy outline in the comprehensive plan that deals with this. Specifically, it deals with location. So one of the first things that the Plan Commission reviewed and gave guidance on is this location appropriate for high-density, student-oriented housing? So as I mentioned, our comprehensive plan gives us very specific guidance to direct student housing away from the downtown. So this location that we are looking at tonight, as well as the surrounding properties, have already been developed with student-oriented housing. So the petitioners are carrying through with that plan for their project. So the location, in terms of is this appropriate, was answered by the Plan Commission of yes, in keeping with previous approvals as well as existing conditions surrounding goods and services, transportation network. This is on Walnut Street, it's a 2-lane road, signalized intersections on both sides. Public transit does serve along this property. It is in proximity to the IU Stadium parking area. There are not many locations in the city that student-oriented housing, especially high-density student-oriented housing, is going to fit in and be compatible with surrounding areas. So this location is very unique and is something that we've highlighted as a location that is appropriate. So as I mentioned, the petitioners are carrying forward with that to develop this in keeping with the comprehensive plan as well as surrounding land uses and previous approvals. So the Plan Commission did review this, and as I mentioned, recommended forwarding this to you with a favorable recommendation unanimously with the 5 conditions that are in our report and on the screen. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Shall we go to the developer for a presentation first? Okay. Is there a presentation from the developer?
I'm Mitch Cordy with Collegiate Development Group.
A little louder.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Mitch Cordy, Collegiate Development Group. So I just want, Eric, if you want to go ahead to the first slide. First off, I do want to say thank you to Eric and city staff. You've been great to work with, and we received feedback along the way from staff, development review, as well as Plan Commission, and we think it's definitely made the project better as we've gotten to this point. So we really appreciate that. This slide just shows we do purpose-built student housing across the country, and aside from showing that we've done this before, it doesn't tell you a lot. But I think one thing I do want to point out is that we really pride ourselves on being good community developers, and I think we like to get feedback from the city and really shape our design around what the city's looking for and what works contextually. And I think looking at the different buildings, different projects, you can see that we're not sort of stamping out the same project across the country. And we feel like we've gotten some great feedback, like I said, from the city on this from a design standpoint, and we're excited with what our architect has come up with. Go ahead. This just hits on a few points that all of our projects have. It's pretty standard in most of the new developments these days, but just focusing on safety for the most part, controlled access, on-site surveillance, on-site management, very important, and then fully furnished units, lots of study rooms, fitness center, washer and dryers in unit, and then obviously a mixed-use component with some retail and dedicated retail parking as well. This slide just highlights a little bit more about what Eric was saying on location. I think, we looked a lot in Bloomington for the past couple of years on sites for student housing, and, we came across this one, and to be honest, a little further out. We usually develop, very sort of urban, pedestrian to campus, right across the street sites. And, in conversations with the city, it was very apparent that this was the target area for student housing for future development. So we were really excited when we came across the site, and, I think it checks the boxes in the comp plan. And, so we think it fits in great, and, we're excited about it. And this is just an aerial. You guys obviously already know where the site is, but just a site or a picture of what's existing. In my opinion, not the highest and best use, but that's somewhat biased. So, and here, so full disclosure, our architect's flight got canceled this morning. Our architect's flight got canceled this morning. So I'm going to act like I'm an architect and just bear with me. I'll try not to embarrass myself, but just walking through, this is our typical floor plan. So starting out on the street, we have the ground floor residential, or sorry, ground floor retail, and then the leasing office to the south, and some amenity space as well, sort of leasing lobby space. And then we also have the fire lane that Eric mentioned. One thing that he did hit on was the retail parking in front, and I think the comment came up, why is the building set so far back from Walnut? And I think a big reason is for that retail parking. We spoke with a number of different retail brokers locally, and they were all pretty adamant that in order for this to be viable retail, we really needed to provide some parking out front of the building. So we took that into consideration. I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you we're always, up more towards the building, the lot line. We do that all the time, but we want the retail to be viable. We don't want it to sit vacant. So take that into consideration, and that's really the main reason why the building is set back. This slide is something we added since Plan Commission. A comment came up talking about the number of 4-bedroom units in the plan and the unit mix. I'll just say, we do a lot of market research on the unit mix, looking at other projects, looking at leasing velocity, and also doing local market surveys. So gathering students locally and talking about, what unit types they prefer. So we do have a high number of 4-bedroom units. And I think one thing we wanted to show, the comment was, in the future, if this were to turn into more of a market rate project, what happens with those 4-bed units? And it's a good question, and it's something we've looked into in the past. And what we had our architect do here is we've taken 2 of our 4-bed unit plans and basically shown how leaving the existing unit as it is, those can be converted into smaller format units. Right here it's showing 2 4-bed units, and they're both converted into one 2-bed unit and then one 1-bed unit. So that's sort of our way. There's no doubt that 4-bedroom units are in high demand in the student housing projects, and as opposed to sort of going away from what's in demand and changing the unit mix, we feel like the better route is to have these convertible units so that, sometime in the future, if things were to shift and it does turn to market rate, we can go ahead and switch things over, but it doesn't have an effect on what's in demand at the moment. Okay, so this is a new rendering that we had done since Plan Commission, and just a few things. You can see the drive in front, the retail, and the leasing office to the right. We tried to get an angle that showed the grade change, which is about 30 feet from Walnut to the back of the site, which is pretty significant. And I think the architects have done a great job of using that in the massing and really making it work throughout the site. And we also showed the Hampton Hotel in the background, just as a little bit of context to try and work that in. And then just the architecture, like Eric pointed out, we added some brick since the Plan Commission comments. We feel like the building is really exciting from just from a texture standpoint and the different use of materials. And we think it's going to look great. It's really provide a great entry into the city as everyone's driving down College or Walnut. And this is just an angle looking south down Walnut, just a little bit different view. Tried to get the neighboring hotel in the background to give a little bit of context of the surrounding buildings, and then you can see a little bit of the grade change also to the left there. And then the drive-through coming in, and you can see how the entry drive has moved to line up with that cross drive across Walnut and College. And I think that's it. Yeah. So that's it, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we're at the point where we have questions from council members. Who shall I start with? Councilmember Sturbaum, you're eager to go.
Well, just to start with on these slides of the appearance, I don't see slides that show the side views. Aren't these the front views of the building? And won't the side views be just as prominent?
Yes, so these are front views. And I guess, are you looking for something that was sort of pulled back much further down College? Or I think Eric had a massing that may have shown it a little bit better, to be honest. When he was flipping through, I noticed that.
There's a project, or maybe back three. There's a project that went in on the west side that always showed the front architecture.
Sure.
It turned out that the way you drove by that was the crappy side.
Right.
And that
Okay.
turned out to be the primary side, even though we never thought of it as the primary side till it was already built. And that's where architecture was skimped on and multicolors were put on, and it happens to be the most prominent side.
Sure.
So
Yeah, no,
I'm
that's-
not seeing the,
So the elevation, Chris, on the top here is the south elevation. So this is the, what would be considered the side facing south. So the petitioners have carried through all of the same building materials, the brick veneers, cementous panel. All of that is repeated throughout the building. So there is not a necessarily good side and a bad side. So they've carried forward the same
so if we're going
modulation.
south, we'll see that.
I'm sorry?
If we're going south, that's the broad side of it.
Honestly, you're not going to see probably 90% of this just based on the topography and existing buildings. You'll see the front corner, certainly, but I don't think you're probably going to see much of the back of
That's
that.
actually
I
going.
think there
That's
were
actually
a
going
couple
north.
slides back that showed it.
Sorry. So that top view that says facing south, though that's if you're driving north on Walnut, that's the angle that you would see.
Right, but I think there was another view that showed two sides at once in color.
Yep.
That, back.
One more.
Back.
There you go.
Now, doesn't that start showing the side as you're going out of town, as you're going south? Isn't that the side that we're seeing?
That's
I
going
oriented
north on
correctly?
Walnut.
What?
That's going north.
This is going north?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, yes.
I don't have an angle going south just because you're across the street
Right,
and
that'd be the
across the
prominent
median.
side I
but
was thinking of.
Yeah, this is going north on Walnut.
Okay. That's just my first question.
You got a few more minutes if you want to.
Okay, why this extreme density? Why, it seems like it's as much as you could possibly get on the property, as high as you can get, as close to the edge, so it created variances in every direction. So was that your number to come with this height, or did planning work this out with you, or how did it get so big?
I think we came to planning with a plan and a proposal, and to be honest, this is a density that it's going to take to make the project work. I know no one wants to hear that, but just construction costs, price of land, we feel like we're at a pretty good number with beds, just with what we do across the country and what we think the market can accept and lease up. So yeah, we're comfortable with the density. I think we feel like the project is contextual. We're not trying to put a 10-story tower around 3 or 4-story buildings. So from an architecture and design standpoint, we feel like it fits in. And yeah, the density, it's something that like I said, we feel like the market can support, and it's really, it comes down to what we need to make the project work.
And the 4-bedroom is not just demand, it's the most efficient use of your project, because you just have one, the facilities are shared by 4, Does that mean the price comes down for those 4 bedrooms, or?
It does, yes, and that's what makes it more attractive to students as well. So yeah, the 4-bed is the lowest price point of the units.
Let's go to Councilmember Piedmont Smith, 5 minutes.
Yeah, in the staff report, it says that the PUD district plan is taking as its basis the commercial downtown zoning district. And I was wondering, commercial downtown, of course, is dictated by overlays currently in our UDO. So which overlay is it using? Is it the downtown gateway?
That was something I think that they did end up spelling out. I think it was the downtown core. The downtown core is one of the areas that deals with buildings. Well, previously, you know, it dealt with buildings that were up to 60 feet in height. So for the most part, all of the architectural requirements, the facade modulation requirements, the building materials are pretty much the same. You know, it's just in the courthouse square where the building materials are a lot closer regulated. But for the most part, the other districts, all of the standards are the same. But they're using the downtown core for the architectural standards.
Well, the setback isn't the same. Can you talk a little bit about the setback for this project? How far is it set back from the street, and how does that compare with the downtown regulations?
So it's a little bit different. You know, in the downtown, there is an allowance for somebody to go right up to the property line with a maximum setback from the front. Same thing on the sides. There's almost little side yard setback in the downtown for buildings. Since this is not in the downtown and is a little bit more suburban, the petitioners are incorporating higher building setbacks along the side and the rear. The front setback has really been dictated by the presence of the commercial along the front and the parking spaces, as well as the access drive.
So if they stuck with the current zoning, commercial arterial, what would the setback be?
I think the side yard setback is,
Front.
for a building, I think it's 7 feet.
What about the front?
Front would be 15 feet from the proposed right-of-way or the block face average, whichever is less.
And what are they proposing?
On the front, I think it's about 20 feet or so from the existing right-of-way.
So, okay. Did you want to go to somebody else?
I can take some questions.
Okay, I have some others, but.
Okay, I have a number of questions. I'm going to go in the order that I wrote them down. Mr. Grulich, you said that early in the presentation that to the north, the east, and the south of this project is largely student-oriented housing. Did you mean that what housing has been built has been student-oriented, or that all construction has been oriented to housing-oriented to students?
Most of the existing surrounding land use consists of student-oriented housing. The exceptions would be the La Charreta restaurant just to the south of this, the La Charreta just to the south of this, and then the vacant restaurant just to the north, and then you've got another hotel just to the north. So along Walnut Street, it's a little bit different. You've got more commercial uses, but as soon as you step back from Walnut Street, you know, certainly as you can see by the aerial here, the Hampton Apartments that are just to the south of this are student-oriented. Plato's Court just to the north of this are student-oriented. Varsity Villas and Stadium Crossing just to the east of this are student-oriented. And then not too far, just to the east of this, you've got the Evolve project again, student-oriented. So the existing development pattern in this neighborhood, for the most part, off of Walnut Street, has all been student-oriented housing.
Thank you. Tell me, maybe this is for the developer, tell me a little bit about how you will put signage up that will make the commercial space more attractive. Like, how do you propose to attract people in through visual elements to the retail spot? Now, this angle is northeast. Which way is it?
So this would be, I guess, looking south, if you were kind of standing in the parking lot and looking back south. So we have our
Where's
leasing-
Walnut Street in this picture?
It's along the front, so kind of where my cursor is
Okay, thank you.
shaking is where Walnut Street would be.
Yeah, so I think, like you can see, the usage of signage, one on the building, and then also some potential street signage. We have signage shown just where the retail spacing would be. I think really the just visibility on Walnut, it gets a good amount of traffic, and having good signage, having the parking available in front, we feel like gives us, the best chance of getting this leased and having some viable retail and commercial. And, the number of students living above does not hurt. So, we have a couple retail tenants that travel with us around the country and are interested in a lot of the projects. And, that's one thing, is having a good amount of students living in the building.
That actually was another question I had, which was, tell me more about your commitment to retail. So when you say you have people who are retailers who partner with you around the country, can you tell us a little bit more about them and show us an example of those retailers in your other projects?
Sure.
Maybe
So-
not now, but,
Yeah. I think all of our projects, except for maybe one or two, have had a mixed-use retail component. It varies in size from market to market. Just to give you an example, we have a project in New Brunswick, New Jersey, under construction right now. It has a similar amount of retail. I think it's about 6,000 square feet. And we've talked to several different tenants, ranging from, breaking the space up to smaller allotments and looking at more, smaller sandwich and pizza, fast food shops like that. And then we've also talked to convenience stores. So CVS, Walgreens, Wawa has looked at it. So those are just a few that, we.
6,000 square feet's enough for a CVS or a Wawa?
Yeah, they actually have an urban concept, which is a much smaller footprint that they've used, yeah.
Okay. What part of code, so I think I heard you say that you brought a plan to the city. And I'm not sure who should answer the question, planning or the developer, but what part of code led you to ask for a building this big? Because as Councilmember Sturbaum said, this is a large project. This is higher than we would expect.
Sure. Yeah, I can take it. So I think looking at surrounding buildings and what's been approved recently probably gives us a good idea of, what we could potentially build.
By
in the area.
surrounding, you mean Evolve?
Yes.
Because that's not exactly nearby this. I mean, it's on the other side, it's 17th and Dunn.
Right, yeah, I mean, we feel like it's still within the vicinity. It's in the same general sort of area that's targeting student housing. And we are on kind of a main street, and there is some surrounding buildings that are of similar scale, a little bit smaller. But yeah, I think we looked at Evolve, and we knew, the city is looking for new student housing in this area, and I guess that gave us a starting point.
Thank you. Mr. Grulich, how tall would a building normally be allowed to be in this area under existing
So
zoning?
in the commercial arterial, 50 feet is the height limit. So as I mentioned with the Evolve project, they were close to 70 feet. Just a little bit over 70 feet. They were about 73 feet at their tallest spot. What the petitioner has done is designed a project that is in keeping with some of the parameters and approved standards that went with Evolve, the density, the height, the stories, and they carried forward with a project that worked with this site. Just for the council's kind of edification right now with the proposed changes to the UDO, we are looking at more of regulating the height and setbacks and not dealing with density. So within the student-oriented housing district, we're looking at giving that a higher level of height and stories, and so far, this would be in keeping with some of that direction that we're going. So what we've looked at is the massing and the model of the building appropriate for the area and not regulating density. So the petitioners have carried forward with a building that fits with this area. The amount of stories, the height is in keeping with what's been previously approved for things in this corridor. Yes, it's not immediately adjacent to Evolve, but it's in that corridor that I mentioned that, this is an area that could be appropriate for more high-density student-oriented housing.
Thank you. I'll go to second round of questions. Councilmember Sturbaum?
So it's kind of like if somebody gets gum, everybody can get gum. The other one got built that large, so this can get built that large. Is that
I wouldn't necessarily say that, this is, these are the standards that we felt were appropriate within this area. Certainly, one project doesn't set the tone for everything, but it does give guidance of, this is the type of building that we want to see in this area. This is the land use that we want to see in this area that is appropriate here, that takes the pressure off of other portions of the city that have had a lot of that. So as I mentioned, this location, is this appropriate? Was kind of the first question. And then two, what is the design and massing of a building that is appropriate for here?
Right, and the side setback variances, were those driven by the developer, or did you have any problem with reducing the side setbacks, and is that going to have any impact on adjacent properties?
So we did not really get, the side yard setbacks that are being proposed, honestly, were not something that came up at the Planning Commission. That was not something that came out of concerns from anyone on the council.
Okay, and then this is for the developer, and you admitted that you weren't an architect, but architects I've talked to have said that some of these modulation requirements kind of screw up their design. And this is the example, I wish we had pictures of the project at West 3rd and Patterson. What's that name of that project?
Patterson Point.
Patterson Point. Yeah, it just got modulated into kind of ridiculousness. And I was going to ask the architect if he was here, if he wasn't modulated that way, would he have designed it differently? Because I saw a number of your designs that weren't so broken up. And then especially the secondary side gets where you can use all the less expensive materials and it just starts looking terrible. So I'm not impressed with the architecture, and
Are we asking questions,
I
Mr.
would have
Chairman?
asked, I already did. Was the modulation a problem, and would the architect be interested in waiving, since everything else is getting waived, we could waive some modulation requirements and help him design a more cohesive building. Do you think he would be interested in that freedom?
I'm sure he would, but I don't think it had a major effect. I mean, I know it was definitely something that came up, and we knew that we had to abide by it. But I guess I would ask, for maybe a little bit more direction on what you think could be changed or could be modified to help with the design.
Right.
I
I'm
think
hearing-
they've really tried to break up the facade and sort of, prevent it from being one large massing across Walnut. Yeah, I mean, like I said, any feedback would be great, just to be a little more defined, so we can, try and help.
Like brick is mentioned, but I only see a little brick on this front facade. Isn't that
So
what
everything that is
the light
gray on this was, so this is brick, all the stuff along the bottom is brick, this center column is brick, this little modulated area is brick, everything along the side is brick. Oops.
So that black and gray is brick.
No, this upper stuff is cementuous panel, but the brick is the stuff in the middle here.
So I see two squares of gray.
Yep. so
And you said
this
there's a
is-
little bit of brick down on the commercial
This is
level.
brick, this center module here is brick,
Right.
all of the stuff on the bottom is brick.
Right.
And then carrying along the side here, you've got brick all along the bottom, and then extending up along the top as well.
But
So-
that brick, that is not a brick column. There's really no brick on that side except for on that little commercial space.
Here, I need to, so in this diagram here, everything is 1 and 2. So you've got brick along the sides here, brick along the bottom that's shown. The majority of the south side is more of the cementuous panel and lap siding.
Right, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, well, that's my question for now.
Thank you.
Oh, I had one more.
Well, no, hang, look,
Oh,
we have
please
more time.
proceed,
We have
yeah.
more time. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, is there a vacant parcel directly to the north of this?
Yes. Well, I mean, it has a building on it, but the building is empty.
Okay. So currently, it's just a green field there? I mean, the building isn't covering all the property, right?
No, there's a majority of the building, or the property that is a parking lot, surface parking lot, and then it's got a building on it.
Oh, okay. I saw some photos. It looked like there was a pretty big green space there.
Nope.
All right. I wanted to ask the petitioner about tree preservation. There are some trees in the, parking lot on the perimeter of Motel 6. Would any of those be able to be saved, or would they all have to come down?
Steve Brehub, for the record. We're just now working through detailed design and grading on this site. My guess is that some of the trees on the perimeter, on the extreme perimeter, may be able to be saved, but I can't commit to that at this point.
Okay, another question for the petitioner. You said the setback from the street was to accommodate parking for the retail or commercial space. In your experience, can commercial space be viable if there's parking behind or to the side of the building?
I think it's 100% dependent on the location. And, a lot of our sites, like I mentioned, are in much more urban environments where it's more pedestrian friendly. And we do all of the parking in the garage on those projects. But there's really no sort of pedestrian activity to drive the retail in this location. So it's much more traffic driven. So like I said, talking with local brokers and this location specifically, the parking in front is necessary. I think there may be another project, maybe in the hotel. I think there's some retail that's still vacant and it does not have parking in the front. And that and a couple other cases we saw around town. But if this project were downtown, we would definitely be open to putting the parking, back in the building in the garage.
Okay. My other question is about Bloomington Transit and bus service to this potential development. Looking at the transit routes, Route 1 only goes north from here. It would stop in front of the building, but it would only go north. To go south, they would have to cross over to College, I believe. And Route 6 does not pass this building at all. So I'm curious what your plans are to ensure that there's direct access to transit for residents.
So we have been working with Bloomington Transit, and we've actually talked to them about different routes that are available, as well as potentially adding a route, depending on how, they can add a route that varies somewhat from what's available. And I think they're still looking into a few different things. One, looking at the cut through across and seeing if they can get a bus across there safely is one issue that we're running into right now. But yeah, we've had very open dialogue and met with Bloomington Transit a few different times, and are hoping we can work something out, whether it's an existing route or providing a new route.
And you would pay for a new route?
Potentially.
All right. Do you all know yet what the lease rates will be for these units, or do you have some estimates for us?
We have estimates. I think the rates start around $800 per bed.
That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take another crack at it. I want to follow up on that Bloomington Transit question. What is your sense of where that route that BT might create for you would run?
So we're looking at having it run in front of the site and then going basically around to all parts of, I guess, the perimeter of campus, if you were looking at the west side of campus. So it would run down towards campus, across in front of the stadium, and then south, down all the way down to, I don't know if it stops at Kirkwood or if it goes a little further, and then it would circle back through downtown and then back up to the project.
I mean, would it, so the boundaries of campus that all buses run around are, in no particular order, 10th, Jordan, 3rd, and Indiana. Are you saying that it would circumnavigate that whole thing, or would it just come down to, say, Dunn Street, and then go down to, in other words, it would go past the sample gates and then go back up?
No, so it would go, and I don't know all the streets, so, but I know it would basically go all the way to the south border of campus,
Okay.
if that answers your question.
Well, it doesn't, but it gets closer. You know, there's a big difference between just skirting the campus on its west side and circumnavigating the main part of campus. So that's something I think we're going to want to know. Either way, the proposal of an entirely new route is, first of all, commendable. I just want to say if that actually happens, I will be very impressed, and that will be one of the biggest reasons why I would say yes to a project like this. But do you realize how expensive it is?
We do, and we've been working, that's part of the conversations that we've had with Bloomington Transit.
I mean, my estimate is we're looking at mid six figures a year to operate such a service. Is that really worth it to you? I guess maybe I should also ask when it would run. How long during the day would it run?
So what do we have? 7 to 7 during the day?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to run such a bus. Is that really the figure that you're thinking about? Has BT given you estimates?
It's in that range, yeah.
Very interesting. Quick question, are the two buildings connected, or are they separated by that drive-through?
They are separated by the drive. There are actually bridges that will cross over just so you can cross from
You can
one
walk
building
across
to the
to
next.
one building
Yeah,
to the
so if
other.
you come up the leasing office into the elevator, you could get to the back building.
Okay, good to know. Tell me more about the stub to the east. What were your conversations with Varsity Villas like? To what extent would you say they were interested in connecting with your project?
So I did not have those conversations directly. It was someone else in our that works with us. He's in our company that deals more on the acquisition side, but I do know he reached out. I think he spoke with the attorney, and it was a pretty brief conversation, just saying, that at this time they're really just not willing to have those students, come through their parking lot. I think they may have lost a parking spot or two, which may have factored into it. But that was pretty much the end of it. It was a pretty hard no, and then at that point we said, we understand.
Okay. Excuse me. I was interested in following up on Councilmember Piedmont Smith's question about the retail. Did you consider, so I'm glad you had this up here, instead of putting the retail on the west side of the project, did you consider moving the building closer to the street and then putting the retail on the south side of the project? And the parking, you've already, well, yeah, and making the building a little bit shorter north-south, a little wider east-west, and the retail be on the south side, which all the cars would see because they're going one way north. Did that enter your architect's consideration or yours?
I don't believe so. I think we always focus on having that retail on the primary facade, just so you're getting a little bit of sight from both College and Walnut. But no, I don't think we looked at providing it on the south side.
If the retail were at the southwest corner instead of the northwest corner, it'd be closer. And then if the parking were on the south side, it would be proximate enough that people would see the parking and the site. Would that be something you would consider?
I think we can look into it. I think the leasing office location is very important, and how the students come in, and we give tours, and the parking. I think it will also have to look in just the shape of the site and getting parking located over, on the south side of the building. And
Well, again, I would imagine
it's a
that you would-
complicated question. So I think we're open to looking into it. I think we feel like we have the most viable retail solution right now.
I'm saying that the footprint wouldn't change in total area. It's just,
Sure.
The goal is to make the building more in harmony with the street. In other words, that it connects to the street. It actually makes it feel like people would walk past it because it's right up against the sidewalk. Is there a comment you have?
If I could add one comment, looking at the building on the top view down, it's not really evident, but in some of the images that you saw, Councilman Volan, you noticed that the flattest and most level area on site was the front, and that moving the retail over onto the south side, then that's where we have to start to deal with the 30 feet of elevation difference going from one end to the other. So really, moving it to the south, we've got a little triangle or a little wedge that's visible.
Thank you for that. That's my 5 minutes. We can go to a third round of questions. Councilmember Sturbaum, do you have any more?
I guess I'm having, well, I guess I'd like to ask staff, what is Gateway North branding? Could you explain that?
That's a good question.
Yep, so that is a section of the comprehensive plan that just highlights this particular corridor that says that we should design buildings along here that have a unique architectural look, that give a very strong feeling of place and design as you're coming into the area. So, Gateway North, this is one of the main gateways into the city, coming from 69 or the bypass. So the comprehensive plan just encouraged us to have unique, good-looking buildings along this gateway.
Okay, so what I'm not seeing, and I think what I'm going to ask for, and I'm asking a question if you could provide this, 3D views as you come into town and as you go out of town, because even though we're mostly focused on the front, that will be the least seen side of this building. And if we want to respect that Gateway North branding, I think we don't just skip on all the brick on the two sides that'll be primarily seen. And I also think for us to know the massing, we're going to have to see a massing view from a distance in both directions that take in all surrounding buildings. And I just know that today you can pop that up in about, if you have the right program, you can pop that up in about a minute. So we want to see that 3D view with the building fit in, because it needs to be compatible as well.
Sure.
Yeah, my question is, can we get those? And also, I guess what I'm saying is I think we need not 360 architecture, but 270-degree architecture where they're all facades. And I don't think they're being treated that way. I guess the other question I had was, do you have any concern that you're under parking or over parking? I mean, the percentage of the students that are going to drive, you have great experience with how students use cars or use bicycles, and have you adequately addressed the bicycle percentage, and do you think you've adequately addressed the automobile numbers that will be coming with this development?
Yes, we do. And, based on our experience, it's 100% market to market. And we've done a good amount of research on this market, talking to existing projects that have more parking, less parking. And, more parking, the projects that have more parking, we've gotten pretty consistent feedback that they have empty spaces that aren't being leased. So that's led us to the number we're at right now. And we feel like, yeah, it's a pretty good number.
And then the second part of the bike parking.
Bike parking, I think we're proposing a minimum of 25% of the bedrooms for bike parking, and to us, that's definitely a minimum. I think our goal is to get closer to probably a third, 33%, maybe even a little bit more. It's definitely a bikeable site as opposed to a walkable site, so yeah, it's very important for us to provide, plenty of bike storage, potentially even bike sharing and things like that, so
Right.
so students don't have to use their car.
So that'd be sheltered in the parking area?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes, I'd like to ask staff, what are the other front setbacks along this corridor? And does this kind of line up with them, or is it closer or further from the street?
So it's a mix. So as you look here to the, let me see if I can get a better, yeah, so it's a mix. Certainly if you start at the very north of the corridor to the
Denny's?
Waffle House or
Denny's.
Denny's.
Thank you. They've got a parking lot. They are on. Let me see if I can get an aerial here. I'm sorry. That'll be easier. It's a mix. The Great Wall that is immediately to the north of this. They're kind of up along the street because they want to be right on the hill as close. The Hampton Inn, as you go further north, is set back very considerably from the road because they've got a huge parking lot that's between them. Just to the south of this, you've got the La Charreta. They are pretty much at the same setback that the Motel 6 is in that they've got a road that runs along the front. As you continue south to the Parkview Apartments, again, you've got a parking lot that separates the building from the street. So all of these have a significant setback from the street, just as a virtue of, the time period that they were developed in.
So you did cite a few that were closer, though, right?
So the Denny's is probably honestly the only one because they don't have a parking lot between them and Walnut.
Okay. And then for the developer,
I'm sorry, and, well, yeah, the gas station, but I don't know if that really counts because they've got a canopy. So the Denny's is up along the corner here, and they put their building right there at the corner to have greatest visibility. But the rest of the buildings along here have, a good amount of parking between them and the street.
thank you. For the developer, are you going to lease the parking spaces separately from the apartments or the bedrooms?
Yes. Yeah, so each tenant will have the opportunity to lease a parking space.
That's all I had.
Kathy, another crack here. The comment was made that affordable housing units are an important component of the urban corridor district. Or I think that was a comment that was in the comprehensive plan cited up here as justification for the project. I'm not sure who should answer this question, but I understand that in lieu of affordable housing on this site, a donation is being proposed for this project. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the amount of that donation is?
I think it is based on, it's a percentage of the bedrooms. So it's 15% of the beds at $20,000 a bed for that 15%. I think it's around like 2.4 million, I believe.
That's a generous amount. I commend you for it. But I would like to ask, I guess, planning, the plan doesn't call for affordable housing units built somewhere else. It calls for them to be an important component of the urban corridor district. What do you say to that? This money would not build these projects in the same area where this building is going up.
Yep, so I think I'll probably defer to some other staff to answer that question that are more involved with those discussions.
I'm grateful that they're here. Hello, Mr. Crowley.
Alex Crowley, Director of Economic Sustainable Development. So ideally, we want units in the buildings. And I know even in Plan Commission it came up, like, is there still an opportunity to put units in the buildings instead of doing a payment in lieu of? And there was some discussion about that. Ultimately, they voted, to move it on unanimously. It's not a perfect science, but what we do think is that there are a lot of cases where units should go in the building. Alley Works just down the street has units.
Sorry, where?
The Alley Works Yellow Cab building has units in the building, so that is our first priority, to do that wherever we can, when we think it makes sense. There are some instances, and that's why the sort of payment in lieu of structure exists, where putting workforce units and likely non-students, therefore, into a development that is really oriented for student use. And, they talk about having shared study spaces and, all of that. It is very much, it's very close to being a dorm. It's not that, but it's oriented very much to students. So our thinking was, look, there are instances like this, in our opinion, where having units in the facility is less optimal. And so the payment in lieu of is designed to try to give an opportunity for developers to contribute to the affordable housing challenge without forcing them to put units into a development where those may not make sense. So, I know in Plan Commission there was some discussion about, can you have student-oriented workforce housing units? It gets a little dicey because we do have minimum, number of hours that people work in order to qualify for workforce housing, so it gets kind of complicated to do that. And that's essentially why we said, in this case, it does seem to make sense to have a payment in lieu of rather than trying to force units in the development.
Thank you. Can I just get a quick number? The amount of bedrooms in the project, thank you, Mr. Crowley, that's all I have for you. Is 800 some, 850 some?
Yeah, 820 beds.
Do you know of a project that has been built that is larger?
You mean
Smallwood is
bedroom count?
704.
So Evolve was 754 bedrooms. So this is obviously more bedrooms than Evolve. Evolve had more units. So density-wise, they're very identical. Evolve was about 75 units an acre. This is about 77 units an acre. So no, outside of the downtown, this is the highest density.
So, I mean, to my knowledge, there's not another project in the city with more bedrooms.
Not outside the downtown, no.
I mean, in downtown, there's a project with more bedrooms?
Smallwood's probably close to that.
704
I'm sorry?
has 704 bedrooms.
Okay.
Okay, so this is literally the largest project ever built in the city of Bloomington, if it was built. Okay, let's see. I think I've gone over. It's time to go to, we've had 3 rounds of questions. Why don't we go to public comment, see if there is any? If there's public comment, please come up and speak. State your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Greg Alexander. I just want to raise some awareness of the sidewalk issues there. I don't know if staff's already addressed this, but south of 19th Street there on the east side of Walnut, there's no sidewalks. Now, I say there's no sidewalks. There's actually 90% of it has sidewalks, but there's a gap. And
They've just said they're going to build that gap. They're going to build, as part of the project, they're going to build out that gap.
okay, thank you. So at Evolve, for example, staff recommended it for the sidewalk connectivity, and there wasn't any. And there's still at the immediate west property line of Evolve, there's a sidewalk gap immediately there. They could have paved 20 feet further and filled that gap, but they didn't. And frankly, when I'm told that a sidewalk gap is going to be filled, I assume that I'm being lied to. Sorry. But more crucially, 19th Street doesn't have sidewalks. And again, I say it doesn't have sidewalks. It has a bunch of sidewalks. It has like 20 different sidewalks, each about 200 feet long. You're going to have to pave that entire corridor. Are they going to do that too? Well, there's no sidewalks on 19th Street. If you're going to campus from this building, you're going to take 19th Street. You're going to walk in the street. There's high-speed cut-through traffic. There's Uber traffic, delivery traffic, every kind of traffic you can imagine. And they're going to be walking in the street. There are no sidewalks on 19th Street. And that's crucial. And then they get to Dunn. Well, there's kind of sort of sidewalks on Dunn, mostly not. There's kind of sort of sidewalks on 17th Street. Again, mostly not. And 17th Street, you've been filling in the gaps for about 5 years now, and there's still a very large number of gaps even between there and campus. And we need, if we're going to build something and say 800 people a day are going to actually walk from there to campus, from there to the bus stop, are going to bike from there to campus, we got to have some sort of infrastructure. We can't leave that as just something hanging that maybe in the future we'll fill out the sidewalk network. Maybe in the future we'll build out a bike lane network. We actually got to do that ahead of time. At Evolve, there have been people living in there for an entire year now. The new class of freshmen is moving into that building, and they still don't have sidewalks to the south. They still don't have sidewalks to the west. They do have sidewalks to the north if they want to go to the bypass, but they don't have sidewalks to the east towards campus, which is where it's most crucial. They got to be able to cross Dunn, and there's no crosswalks at Dunn. There's crosswalks at weird intervals along Dunn, but not at 17th and Dunn, not at that crucial intersection. And there's no sidewalk on the east side of Dunn, which is crucially needed. People actually do walk through that drainage ditch. It's about a 5-foot loss of elevation and an 8-foot gain on the other side. They walk through that drainage ditch because there's no sidewalk. And that's insane. We need sidewalks. We need sidewalks so desperately. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there further public comment?
My name's Lance Furr. I'm trying to read. I'm speaking on behalf of University Properties, which is, Stadium Crossing and what used to be called Varsity Villas, right? And we own most of that, and Cedar Creek and Varsity Court. So it's like approximately 1,150 bedrooms near the stadium. First, I want to speak first about the density. So this proposal is like 3.85 acres in size. The density limitation for the property is 15 units per acre, which would allow for a maximum of 57 units on the property. The applicant, however, has proposed the construction of 270 units, which equates to 70 units per acre. So that's like 500% over the allowable density. This density is granted at the direct expense of the green space, impervious surfaces, sight lines, and despite parking and traffic and safety concerns. And this density is not even necessary, in our opinion, given the fact that the student enrollment has been declining since 2016. IU has increased on-campus housing over the last few years, and they plan to complete the construction of the new North Hall in 2020, which will house around 700 students. Our question is, why violate the density and the UDO restrictions to such an extreme when the housing is not necessary? If the applicant complied with the UDO restrictions, they could still add about 175 bedrooms to an already sufficient inventory. They attempted to justify the project as proposed, the density I'm talking about, despite the many problems, by stating that the provision of the estimated 820 bedroom units in commercial space along the corridor will increase the tax base to the city, and the construction of the building will benefit the local workforce and adjacent commercial businesses. It is possible that the increased valuation of this parcel could temporarily help the tax base. However, since the PUD will inevitably decrease the value, in our opinion, of the surrounding properties, as noted by planning in the prior meetings, a net increase in the tax base to us is questionable. The assertion that the building will benefit local workforce and adjacent businesses is also questionable. The use of the local contractors for construction is certainly not a given. Moreover, the idea that 820 beds will increase revenue for surrounding businesses is simply not proven. The tenants of this project will be students. The construction of this project will not cause additional enrollment at IU. In fact, the enrollment is being declining. So there will be fewer students frequenting local businesses, not more, despite the construction of more housing. So the next issue is the parking. The owners of university properties, we have owned and managed the student rentals near the stadium for over 16 years and currently manage, like I said, 1,150 bedrooms, most of which are only a few yards from the stadium and the ample parking there at the stadium and the bus stops. Our data show that 75% of our tenants have cars. Only 10% have bikes, and like 15% have neither. Given the proximity of these the petitioners' units to the parking at the stadium and the IU bus stops, it's much longer walk and much longer distance of the PUD from the stadium and the IU bus stops, and a comparatively much longer distance from the same resources. It is quite likely that at least 80% of the PUD residents will have cars. That percentage will result in 656 cars. With only 400 parking spaces, where will those additional 256 cars be parked? I mean, our comment, hardly any of our people, we provide bicycle places. Theirs is going to be much nicer than what ours is, but we do provide bicycles. They just don't have them. They have cars, and theirs is farther away. So this situation will quickly become unmanageable along 19th Street because we own like 23 houses along in that whole area too. We submitted a letter to the council. This letter, issued in conjunction with our neighbors, the Hamptons and John Sieber, outlines many more specific concerns and details how the PUD fails to meet the requirements for PUDs under the UDO. That letter specifies how the proposed PUD violates nearly every single development standard applicable to the property. It contravenes the express intent of the PUD ordinance and fails to satisfy any of the required considerations for PUDs. We are left to wonder why the planning has approved the PUD despite all these obvious problems and failings. Well, the answer is the donation, which is obviously going to be very helpful to the low-income housing fund, the $2.46 million. Unfortunately, local investors and developers can't afford to write checks of this amount simply for the right to bend the rules. This council must now decide whether applicable rules, local businesses, and the environment and the character of this town will be sacrificed for the money and for the ability of large out-of-town corporations to earn profits at the expense of local businesses, local property owners, and local developers. We trust that the council will make the correct decision and require the PUD not to deviate from the UDO provisions by such an extreme. So I'm not saying we're against it. I'm saying that the density's too high and the parking's too low. One other thing I'd like to address, they talked about how they had gotten in contact with us about the cutting through the fence. I got the email, and this is in the entirety of the whole conversation. And basically, the last thing that was said was, we said, the HOA, which is the Varsity Villas Homeowners Association, which owns the fence, and the HOA is open to hearing how you might alleviate the security concerns that we outlined in the previous email string. So the HOA is open to hearing how you might alleviate the security concerns, and then they get back to us and they say, thank you for the reply. I will circulate within our group and circle back with you. This was June 4th. We have not heard anything. All we asked, they said they asked us, and we said we got concerned. They haven't gotten back to us since June 4th. So to say that we have a hard no, or that we are not responsive, or that whatever, is kind of misleading, really. So if you want to see it, I'll show it to you. Anyway.
I'll talk about it after the meeting. Thank you for the
Okay.
presentation.
All right. Thanks.
Any other public comment?
I'm Tom Beavis with the Hamptons Townhomes located at 1739 North Washington Street. Our property is on the south side of the CDG project and connects on the southeast corner of their project. We have 31 luxury townhomes and 93 beds, and we're required to provide 93 parking spaces, one per bed. This past year, which is typical, we issued 84 parking permits, which is 90% and the remaining 10% parking places are used by guests, and that's worked well for us for the past 14 years. We're not opposed to the student housing development. However, we have three concerns that we would like the council to take into consideration. First, we are requesting the 100-foot portion of the CDG project that adjoins our north townhomes be kept at a 15-foot side yard setback and deny the 7-foot side setback variance they have requested for that 100-foot portion only. We're not talking about the whole project, just a portion that's going to create a problem for us. With the height of their building and ours, and only a 7-foot setback, it will create a section worse than an alleyway and would harm the green space, trees, and everything that we have in that area currently. Secondly, I'm sure they will be building a high-quality development, but the density proposed, I believe, will become a long-term problem with only 50% parking spaces being provided. It is easy to say it will be their problem in renting rooms, when in reality, it will become our problem and every landowner in the area. Having cars towed is not good for business or renewals, and I don't feel that burden, nuisance, and additional policing should be placed on the surrounding neighbors. Any student that can afford to stay in the new CDG complex will have or want to have a car. Our townhomes are also considered Class A, and 90% of our students own cars. This project could be cut back by a third and still be very profitable for the developer and provide green space, et cetera, normally required by the city. Thirdly, We were requested by the city to purchase an easement through the adjoining motel for life safety vehicle access when we built our project. That easement, ingress and egress, is being moved without our permission, and according to our council, that is against state law without first getting permission. No one has contacted us for that permission. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
This is just for comment right now.
Okay.
If the committee wants to communicate with members of the public, we will do so after the meeting. Are there any other public comment? Comments, plural? Seeing none, we come back to the council. We have about 20 minutes or so. I want to give each member a chance to comment, but if there's one last round of questions, we can take a couple of quick bites of the apple. Councilmember Piedmont-Smith?
Yeah, I'm hoping staff can respond, staff or the developer can respond to this question about moving the ingress egress to access the Washington Street townhomes.
Yes, so the access, we are proposing to shift it just slightly north to line up. And I think we have reached out to the hotel owner to the south, who we believe has that access easement. I was not aware that Tom had the easement as well. So, I mean, we're happy to reach out. I think it benefits everyone, to be honest, to be able to make the straight left out. And it's just a small shift. So I'm sorry if that was an oversight, but we'll reach out to Tom. We have reached out to the hotel owner to the south to discuss that. But yeah, we'll talk to Tom as well.
And what does the hotel owner to the south say to it? Do they have any issue with it?
He has not responded to us, to be honest. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so that needs to be
Yeah, no, absolutely.
discussed
Absolutely.
among all
Yep.
parties and agreed
Absolutely.
upon.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, okay.
Councilmember Sturbaum?
Yeah, so had that setback issue come up before, and have you discussed it or considered it?
Are we talking about the setback
The
to the,
100
on the
foot
south?
on the south,
the
just not
side?
mentioned.
So I don't believe this has come up before. I think one misunderstanding potentially when you look at the plan, we have a line that says 7-foot setback, and I think it can easily be interpreted that that is our building setback, when in reality, I think the building is set back 11 to 12 feet off the property line. So there may be some misinterpretation there. I think the code language does have it at 7 feet as a minimum, but right now we are planning 11 to 12. But this is the first time it's come up. I think there's a lot of other things going on the site that are driving that, whether it's the easement on the north side of the building. We have a 20-foot water line easement that we're relocating that water line, and the fire lane. So there's a lot of push and pull going on with the site. And I think, like I said, we're 11 or 12 feet now, which we feel like is sufficient.
Right, I think 15 is the standard, is that right? And
For
that side
commercial
setback?
arterial?
Well, for the zoning district, 7-foot is the side yard building setback. Obviously, that was designed with a 50-foot building in mind. If the council feels that an increased setback is more appropriate, then that's certainly something that can be addressed.
I mean, they're not getting a variance for a 7-foot setback, that's,
Well, so with the PUD, they are requesting a specific set of standards that would govern this property. So the underlying zoning district would say 7. They're proposing a little bit more than that. As I mentioned, if council feels that an increased setback is warranted along that, then, we would encourage them to propose a condition that addresses that.
okay. Did it come up that this may be too big as far as traffic and parking issues? Has that issue been discussed, or has everyone just pretty much stayed on the same number?
So the issue or the item for discussion certainly was once brought up that, this will result in increased traffic in the area. That's certainly undeniable. This is one of the few locations in the city that it has a 2-lane, 1-lane road or, one-way road right in front of it. You've got signalized intersections both to the north and the south of this. It's not directing any traffic through residential neighborhoods. College and Walnut handle a substantial amount of traffic every day. What we found with multifamily developments, especially student-oriented, is there's not a lot of traffic that comes and goes during the course of the day. The kids are at school. The peak periods of time are after that. So that kind of ebbs and flows with the variety of land uses that are in an area. So yes, there's going to be more traffic here, but we're not planning to widen Walnut Street to 3 lanes or do anything else. So the area is adequately deals with traffic, and so that specific issue has not really been a major issue.
Is this a new concern that there may be more cars than there are parking spaces?
Certainly,
surrounding property.
as the council is aware, there's a wide range of opinions on this topic. It was addressed at the Plan Commission hearings regarding the number of parking spaces, but this goes along with a lot of the concepts of the comprehensive plan of encouraging alternative transportation, not providing parking spaces for every single bedroom that's in a development. This is going along with a lot of where our comprehensive plan and the UDO go to discouraging extra-vehicular parking and promoting alternative transportation.
Certainly heard that from my colleagues as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll take one more question. I have so many, unfortunately. I guess I want to just ask the question, why did planning see the setback as, did planning staff ever see the opportunity for the setback to be closer to the street rather than as far back as it was?
So that was one of the things that we talked about early on with this petition, is bringing the building up along the street. With the mixed-use component to this, and this is a common theme that we've heard in many developments for mixed use. When you've got ground floor commercial space, is in order to make that viable, you need to have parking spaces immediately in front of that. With several other petitions, there's been the ability to have on-street parking spaces that provides that need. There are lots of petitions that have come through the council that this has been demonstrated on. This is a situation where there is not the opportunity for on-street parking on Walnut Street. Whether it be parallel or angled spaces, this is just not appropriate, and this isn't the area that is available in. So they've provided a limited number of parking spaces to make that commercial space valuable. Certainly where that space is in the building can be discussed and potentially moved, but the limited parking spaces there are just a factor of where the retail space is, and that's the best answer for that.
Thank you. At this point, I will entertain comments from my colleagues. And a recommendation, I will say that my personal recommendation is that we continue this to the 28th, that there are a lot of questions to be answered. Who would like to start with comments? Councilmember Sturbaum?
Yeah, I have some concerns about a small concern about the 4-bedroom. We were pretty much over having 4 bedrooms, and in the long term, it is strictly a student apartment when it's 4-bedroom, and maybe we're just going to say that's what it is. I think mostly, if the scale, I need to see the scale, and I need to see that 3-dimensional view of the surrounding streetscape, massing model in 3D from different directions, and maybe even one that you can move around. Those are helpful. I think the gateway corridor is a requirement that it not look like crap. And I think we need to be assured that it doesn't. And I think those 2 side views really have some work to do. And without being able to see the context and without being able to see those views in a more understandable way, I don't think I feel comfortable approving the design of the building. It has something like 24 different materials on it. Seems like designed by modulation rules. And I'd like to see a little better view of what is there before we send it on to council, so that I can assure that we're not unintentionally building something that is more of an eyesore than an attractor to the community. So that's I say that because we don't have any real design review in the city, even though we've needed it forever. So it ends up being designed by kind of committee, by planners, by, what the architect has feedback from rules that are built in that sometimes just results in less than satisfactory outcomes. So I would like to see this continued and get to see those views for the next,
Thank you, Councilmember Sturbaum. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I have a problem with this just from the point of view of granting a PUD and when a PUD should be granted. In the staff memo, it outlines exactly when a PUD would be appropriate. And I'm just going to go through these points. So it's anticipated that the PUD will offer one or more of the following advantages. A, implement the guiding principles and land use policies of the comprehensive plan, specifically reflected in the neighborhood. So this, we do see that, I think in the comprehensive plan discussions, this was an area that, did call for greater density. But we haven't implemented the comprehensive plan with a new UDO yet, so we're kind of in a gap period where we haven't created that guidance that should be in effect for this area. Next, it says buffer land uses proposed for the PUD so as to minimize any adverse impact which the development may have on surrounding properties. I don't think that's been done in this case. I think that the surrounding properties will be negatively impacted just based on the massing and the height of this proposed set of buildings. C, enhance the appearance of neighborhoods by conserving areas of natural beauty, green spaces. Okay, well, I think that boat already sailed in the 70s when all the concrete was poured in this area, so we'll skip that one. D, counteract urban monotony and congestion on streets. Okay, I think there will be some increase in congestion just because of the number of vehicles and residents with vehicles that will be living here. I do recognize that they would be students and therefore their traffic patterns would be different from many commuters who use this street, but I don't see any reduction in congestion. E, promote architecture that is compatible with the surroundings. Well, the surroundings don't look very nice, so I would say let's not be compatible with those surroundings, but I do want to join my colleague, Mr. Sturbaum, in saying that we do want quality architecture, and we've been burned many times where things look much better on paper than they do in reality, so we do need those 3D views. Evolve, for example, does not look as nice as it did on paper. Okay, moving on, F, promote and protect the environmental integrity of the site and its surroundings. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's not much environmental integrity left in this site, unfortunately. But also, it is not going to add to any it's not going to add any environmental benefits either if we approve this. And then G, provide a public benefit that would not occur without deviation from the standards of the Unified Development Ordinance. I don't see public benefit from this. We have to separate the land use question from the question of a donation to our affordable housing fund. We do not want to engage in pay-to-play, so I'm just separating that right here. I have to look at the building, the project as proposed, and whether it would provide a public benefit. I don't believe it would. I think it would provide expensive student housing, which we already have plenty of, and a type of architecture that we've also, looks just like Evolve to me. I mean, we also have plenty of that. So I disagree with staff that this architecture is unique and provides something different. So not many points scored there when I run down what a PUD should do. I just want to reiterate how drastic a change this is proposed from what the current zoning is. So the current commercial arterial is 15 units an acre. Proposed is 77 units an acre, 5 times, more than 5 times the density. Current allowable of impervious surfaces is 60%, proposed is 70%. We need to have more green space, not less, okay? Climate change is a real thing. We need more trees, climate sinks. We shouldn't be compromising on that. Commercial arterial height limit is 50 feet. They are proposing 85 feet. Commercial arterial front setback is 15 feet. They are proposing 20 feet. Which leads me to my next point. Are we giving up on this street as a pedestrian-friendly area? Because it sure sounds like it. The reasoning for having the setback and having the parking in front of the building is, hey, everybody's going to drive here. Nobody's going to walk here. Well, sure, that will be the case if we keep building for cars. I mean, we already lost the battle on 3rd Street, where we have that lovely frontage drive and parking in front of the totally vacant commercial space at Patterson and West 3rd. We tried to convince them to have on-street parking, to have the building up close to the street, because that's what it takes to make things pedestrian-friendly. And just giving up on it and saying, this street is just hopeless, is very short-sighted in my view, because we're going to come to a time very soon in the next few decades where it's going to be frightfully expensive to drive, and more people are going to be choosing other forms of getting around because of climate change. And we need to be proactive about this. We need to reclaim our streets for pedestrians, for bicyclists. And so I think we need to at minimum, stick with what our current code says, which is a maximum 15-foot setback. I think that people who drive are smart enough to be able to read a sign that says parking in the back. Okay, it's worked in many, many places. They don't have to visually see the parking space. So I think this whole thing is really problematic. I also think that the proximity of this location to amenities and to campus has been exaggerated. It's not right near a grocery store. No way. Nobody is going to walk from here to the closest grocery, which is on Kinser Pike, crossing, multiple highways to get there. It's also not as close to campus as Evolve. It's a 10 to 12-minute walk to get to the bus terminal at the stadium. So there have been some exaggerations here, which I feel the need to point out. So I have many problems with this. I don't know if anything can make me vote in favor of this, given the density, but we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. My concerns break down to 3 different areas. One is transportation. So I was interested in the comments from some of the nearby owners, and particularly the part that the former Varsity Villas is not necessarily opposed to further communication with the project. My thought as I was listening to the discussion was, if this project is really proposing a new bus route, to have that bus route go through Stadium Crossing, Varsity Villas on the way to the stadium ought to seem like a benefit, especially if it's an electric bus. It wouldn't be loud, and everybody who lives there would benefit from the bus going through it. But that only works if the stub is connected. So I'd like that to be thought about. But when it comes to the comment, which I've been hearing a lot lately, that IU has not been growing since 2016, First of all, this year, 2 dorms are closed. They're building a new dorm, and they're remediating McNutt and Foster because of the mold problem. And so they've leased 3 local projects like this for freshmen. So it's going to be very tight this year, and no one's going to believe it when they hear that the student population is shrinking when it comes to, I think lease rates are going to be higher this year. And furthermore, IU's building the first net new dorm housing in 50 years with this project. And every year, or every 2 years since 2000, you can find, and I have found, articles in the IDS about students living in lounges, because IU continually underpredicts how many people will be enrolled. So every time I hear this comment that IU is suddenly not growing anymore, I'll believe it when I see the numbers in September about how many students are living in lounges. One reason that student-oriented housing is a problem is that it encourages only certain kinds of retail, and it discourages others, as Mr. Furr noted. But I think that if there's one thing that this project is doing right, more than anything else, it's the ratio of parking to beds. That I'm getting the impression that somewhere around 0.5, which is the maximum that we've been encouraging downtown. They're certainly following the prescription that planning has been following in recent years. That's the maximum that I would want to see. Smallwood, which has 704 beds, has 213 parking spaces. It's 0.3. Somehow they make it work, and it's because actually the 6 and the 9 run right past the building. And so students who live in that project have a choice. The second thing I want to say is that we should be trying to make the area more urban, especially if the developer is trying to mimic the density of the downtown. They should also be required to mimic the setbacks of downtown. I absolutely disagree with the idea that the parking has to be literally between Walnut Street and the business, especially if it's moved to the southwest corner. The parking can be on this also on the other side of the southwest corner. If there's only 8 spaces that can be accommodated, I don't see any reason why that can't be done. And frankly, this project is an argument to make those streets 2-way as well, to make it less of a highway going right past this project. The retail could be on the side, like I said. Denny's just up the street is an example of that. The entrance is on the south side. The parking lot is on the south side. But the third thing I want to say in closing is that I vehemently oppose the Evolve project. It was making an exception to the rules we had worked a long time to try and build. And I concur with my colleagues that, it was as, I don't want to say bad, I'd say inappropriate as I predicted. It's too big. There's certainly way too much parking, especially considering that there's the stadium lot right across the street from it. They could have worked out a deal to have people park at the stadium. The idea that Evolve and this project are part of the same corridor really irritates me. Sorry, but Walnut and College are a corridor. This is a huge area of land. Granted, it's mostly student-oriented. But I object even more vehemently to the very notion that we're about to adopt a housing type called a land use called student-oriented housing. I absolutely oppose this idea. I do not want to expand the bad habits that IU has and that every college has in building campuses. I do not want my city to become a campus. And I fervently believe that affordable housing can be intermixed with student housing on this site. I also believe that not everyone who'll rent here is necessarily going to be a student. If you gave people a choice, you would have 5, maybe 10% non-students who would want to live in a project like this. But the developer should have to want to try to attract that kind of housing. I don't know why they don't think about acquiring the empty restaurant to the north and building the 110 affordable beds on that site. We could have, it wouldn't have to be in the same building, and we would have in that area more than just student-oriented housing. So the idea that this whole area, we should just shrug it off and give up on it, not try to reestablish the street grid, not try to make the place fully more like downtown and not just sort of pay lip service to downtown, bothers me a lot. Finally, this project is nowhere near the campus, which is again why I commend the petitioners for proposing a bus route, a whole new bus route. That is, to me, much more valuable than the affordable housing. That housing prices and transportation costs together make a place affordable to live. And that bus, I really just can't say enough things about it. I think that the developers could reduce the parking on site in order to build more units if they're going to build a bus route and fund it to the tune that they said they would. So I'm intrigued and by that possibility. Otherwise, I have a really hard. I agree with Councilmember Piedmont Smith about how the PUD is just sort of, well, we don't really like the housing, the restrictions in the UDO, so we're just going to sort of punt and try to get as much as we can, regardless of whether it follows the UDO or not. The densification is much greater, and the owners of units around this project are right to question why so much density. If it's going to happen, it ought to be more coherent. So I've gone over time. I would like to recommend, to see a recommendation that we move to the 28th. Do I have such a recommendation?
So moved.
Need a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor of moving to the 28th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. So we're going to have a second hearing at 5:30 on well, actually, we haven't set the time yet. We don't know what's going on that day, so we're not going to set a time yet. I'm hoping it'll be similar to this. And I would recommend to the developers, at the very least, to make sure the architect is back. And if the architect owns SketchUp, that was a very successfully demonstrated project that Lockley did at the corner of Hillside and Henderson 3 years ago. They used SketchUp to demonstrate 3D what's going on. That is the single, I think, most important thing you could bring back here. But I would encourage the committee members to meet with everyone who's here tonight after this meeting to talk about things we'd like to see on the 28th. But having said that, I think I've spoken enough. Any other comments?
Move to adjourn.
Do you want to say something? Say something.
No, I just would our recommendation be either to deny next week or to send it on to council?
It'd be 3 weeks from now, and we only have the power to recommend. We can recommend approve, deny, or approve with changes. It's what you might think, but it's just a recommendation.
Will it end up at the full council?
Absolutely. We do not have the ability to kill legislation, and that's not what the committee was set up for. Is everybody understood about that?
I wanted to reassure a little bit.
Yeah. We are only making a recommendation to the full council, which will hear it no earlier than September 4th. Having said that, I would urge everyone who came tonight to stick around for a few minutes before the council meeting and let's chat. Thanks very much. This meeting is adjourned.